So this week on AEW television, we actually saw something a little bit different than we're used to seeing, with Rampage going on right after AEW Dynamite, giving us the equivalent of a 3 hour show. Because even though if it's two different shows, they bled right into each other like normal. Um, so with that being said, it was kind of like our first taste of weekly television with AEW kind of being like a 3 hour Monday Night Raw. Now, with that in consideration, how people look at Raw versus the kind of attention Rampage currently usually gets, I ask you, do you think it would be better if they just cut Rampage and went to a 3 hour show, or maybe you still call it Rampage, a la Monday Night Raw slash Warzone, Raw is War back in the day?
Mhm. Um, so I haven't seen, I guess we haven't seen what their ratings were or anything yet. But honestly, I think this might be better for them because boy, do I not really want to watch Rampage Friday nights. Um, uh, I- and I tell you to watch Rampage a lot. Like I love Rampage, but I rarely ever watch it live
It's
because
Rampage, baby.
I'm it's Friday at 10 p.m. You know what I'm doing Friday at 10 p.m.? I am either about ready to pass out because it was a long week or I'm out somewhere. But most likely I'm at home passing out. But still, I always watch Rampage the next day. Whereas this Dynamite Rampage, yes, it was long, but I could do that. I think I could do that once, just to know that I'm only going to be watching that show, and
Hmm.
then collisions. That's my dessert wrestling. I just have that as my cherry on top on the weekend, so I could get down with this.
So I think it's an interesting conversation to have simply because of Rampage's normal slot. So if you want the same amount of television, it to me it does make all the sense in the world to do it that way. Because yeah, having three different nights, especially back to back nights on Friday and Saturday, that just is a recipe for both of those shows not to do well. If you pushed Rampage is 1 hour over to Wednesday night, I think it could potentially even help Collision because now you're not saturating those couple of days. And it's easier to kind of pick or choose, like, hey, I'm going to watch wrestling one of these two nights, Friday or Saturday. Well, now you're not making a choice, and you can kind of work your plans around it if you're a kind of person that wants to watch wrestling that bad. But on the other hand, we've had 3 hour Monday Night Raws for what, almost 20 years or over 20 years? I don't know. Somewhere around early 2000s, I feel like.
Yeah, at the very least, from the early 2000s on. Yeah.
Because we know early Attitude Era, late 90s, it was 2 hours. So it was at some point around 2000 or a little bit later. But we've had it for that long, and there's not a single person that enjoys Raw being a full 3 hours. You might find some people that aren't screaming to cut it back down to two, but you don't see anyone being thankful that it's 3 hours.
Mhm. Yeah. And my only argument against that is there's a whole lot of wrestling in AEW. It feels like the time goes by a little bit faster when you're watching a lot more wrestling. Whereas on a 3 hour Raw show, maybe an hour is wrestling. If you're lucky, just that's I feel like that's what drags Raw out for me. Like I can only watch highlights of it because I end up falling asleep.
Yeah, it feels like a lot of like log entrances and a lot of like lulls in the show. I feel like if AEW got back to firing on all cylinders where the show kind of freely flowed from one thing to the next, and it
Mhm.
didn't feel like you had stopping points and starting points as often, that really does help make the show run smoothly, and it goes by a lot faster. So if you could do that, cut any Chris Jericho matches or segments, and you'll be well on your way. I'm sorry, I hate it. I freaking grew up loving him, but at this point, it's just hard. And that's the one thing that, like, if you put that in the middle of the freaking show, it's gonna be really hard to like. It's gonna be a really big lull. You know what? Jericho has to open every show,
Oh no.
so we can get it over with.
That's
The show really starts
no,
at like 8:25.
you just here's the Jericho time, and then here's the real show. That's great. No, um, but no, this is yeah, Jericho's a problem, but I think this 3 hours could definitely work for them. And yeah, it seems like they aren't flowing the same way they were just a little bit ago, but I think part of that is that they're definitely trying new things. Like we got the new set, and like the way that they did the Okada and Eddie Kingston with Renee down there already talking
Mm-hmm.
as
Yeah,
they, before they come out. Like they're doing things a little bit differently, and it'll probably all flow together a little bit better as we keep going here.
because we've seen it time and time again in AEW, like a tag team will come out and interfere, let's say Taven and Bennett in the previous match, and then they just stay out there after that match, and the next opponents come down, so you don't necessarily have to do the entrance. I swear to God, we've also seen it recently where Taven and Bennett have gone to the back and redid their entrance. Like, that's unnecessary. So when you can kind of have like those little things flow together and you can kind of speed up some of the process. um Similarly, we've seen people like exiting from a match kind of pass somebody on the ramp who's coming down for the next match, and they use it sometimes for story beats and stuff. But like when you can just do those little things where everything's constantly in motion and there's not like a pause in between parts, it definitely helps. And I will definitely take 3 hours on one. I'll take my 5 hours over 2 days over instead of 3 days every single time.
Yeah, yep. That's what I feel like it's the days thing. Now let's see if it works for them in the ratings, but I would not be against them trying out 3 hours dynamite. What's it gonna hurt?
Yeah, especially
Mm,
thinking about it even one step further. Imagine pay-per-view weekends. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I don't want to block off a whole freaking weekend. Not unless I'm going to like a major event like All Out Weekend or something.
yeah,
That's the only time I
yeah,
want to say
but yeah,
Friday, Saturday, Sundays for wrestling.
yeah. Like it's hard. It's hard to get me to watch 2 days of WrestleMania, and that's WrestleMania, like the biggest wrestling event in the world, and I still am like, I gotta. That's 2 days in a row of how much?
And at the
Uh,
same time, it's doing the exact opposite of what we're saying about the shows flowing, because WrestleMania is some of the worst paced showing like in the history of like wrestling, just period. Match ends, next
yeah,
one starts in about 32 minutes. Sorry.
yeah, and that's why I think that, like we were saying, I think 3 hours is gonna feel different. I'm not trying to trash the WWE product here, but I think 3 hours when there's that as much wrestling as AEW does, I think that's what's gonna really set it off if they actually decide to go that way.
Not trying to
So
trash WWE and Raw, it's just the fact that they are the cautionary tale in this matter. That's all. Let us
mm,
know what you think. Drop a comment down below.